Well, good morning, folks. It's the real Captain Kirk here. It is the 1st of February. Hard to believe. We are in our remote offices here today, where, again, it's a wintry wonderland. We'll show more of this video here toward the end. Obviously, we're getting a pretty big nor'easter type storm here for our area of eastern PA and New Jersey and New England. This storm, as it's moved across the country, so this chart right here shows that we're trending the most snow in 6 years for this storm, 129 through Feb 30, so third most in 35 years. So a big storm. The challenging with these kinds of storms is you get what is called a deformation zone and a dry slot. So if you get in that deformation zone, you get dumped on and you get 2-3 feet of snow pretty quickly. If you're in the dry slot, you get a lot of unhappy people because you can bust a big storm pretty quickly. Somebody will get into each with this storm. So there'll be some folks that are happy with what they got and others that won't be so happy. Here's the general thinking here for snow ending here at 7 o'clock tonight. Again, just a very long, prolonged event. Groundhog Day tomorrow. This suggests that it's going to be cloudy out in Punxsutawney Phil area of Pennsylvania. So probably if he doesn't see a shadow, he's not scared. It means spring is near. So we'll see about that. Probably be snowing out there this time tomorrow morning. Again, lingering snow as this storm starts to exit. Again, slow mover out of the northeast. Thursday, we just get, again, broader light snow across the country. Maybe a little heavier there by Friday into the Great Lakes. And then getting a little bit of a polar vortex here. We'll talk about that here in a bit. Looking at this is a U.S. snowfall index versus a year ago on a national scale. So we had a one snowier week there in mid-October that was much snowier than this time last year. Obviously, the big blizzard we had here in the Northeast was around the 17th of December prior to Christmas. So we had some few weeks there in December that were much snowier than last year. When you kind of a snow drought for a few weeks in January, and now we're peaking most likely for the winter season here. So this week, trending 576 inches on a national index basis. So again, just a ballpark. Again, this is clearly the snowiest week of winter, most likely. And then as we get into mid-February, probably as it gets colder with the vortex, we tend to get drier. So we're probably it's probably it here for the peak week of the winter snowfall season. Looking at snowfall here, season to date, as map left, a lot of folks have had snow, just about every state but Florida. Even Hawaii had some heavier snow on top of the mountains, high mountains above 13,000 feet. Index chart here right shows that, again, we're still trending, as of yesterday, 9% less snow than last year, 13% less than average, and the least snow in 5 years on a national scale. So it's been a snowy week for sure this week. But again, we got a lot of ground to make up here if we're going to get back to average here, and probably won't hit that here this winter season. Looking at a recap here of January across the world, so these big maps are the world temperatures versus average and precipitation versus average big maps. Maps bottom left there are the trends versus last year for the U.S. So here in the U.S., we're about 1.8 degrees colder than last year for January overall. Still made it the 9th warmest in 35 years, above average temperatures. 25% less rainfall versus last year, least in 6 years on a national scale, making it the 14th driest in 35 years, so below average there as well. Snowfall was just a tiny bit above, actually below last year, so made it the least in 8 years, 8th least in 35 years. So snowfall was pretty light, below average for sure. Looking at a last week's summer here on a world scale, 24 through January on a National Retail Federation calendar, how our big retail clients look at the weather. U.S. here was about 5 degrees colder than last year, so it is cold. Still 18th warmest in 35 years, but below average for the U.S. overall. 102% wetter, so again, with this big storm that traversed the entire country from California through the Midwest and now in the Northeast. Wettest in 9 years, 7th wettest in 35 years, above average there. Snowfall 400% more than a year ago, snowiest in 6 years, way above average there as well. Maps inset left are trends versus average. Canada, a whopping 13 degrees colder than last year, so pretty cold, almost coast to coast across Canada, Europe. 6.1 degrees colder versus last year. Russia warmed up a bit in southwest Russia there after an epically cold polar vortex there for a couple weeks, but still a tad cooler. China a bit warmer, warmest in 7. Australia still continuing their cold summer trends, 3.8 degrees colder, cold in 6. India finally cooled off a bit, about a degree cooler than last year, and Brazil still, again, trending cool and dry, but 1.9 degrees cooler, coolest in 9 years. Looking at some factors here that'll play a role here for the rest of winter into spring here. This is the Great Lakes ice coverage. We're still pretty light, to say the least, here. This is well below average ice coverage. It's only about 16% of the lakes have ice. That's significant because when we do get this polar vortex, you can certainly get some massive lake effect wintry snow events here with brutally cold air coming across these unfrozen lakes. So we're up a bit over last year's non-existent ice coverage, but again, pretty light for this time of year. Another major factor here is La Nina, and we were kind of concerned this might happen, but it looks like we're going to have kind of this double dip La Nina. Currently, we're still in the weak phase, but the models are still trying to project. In fact, almost every single model run now is trying to project a moderate to strong, even very strong La Nina as we go through the entire 2021 season. So this is simply a cooling of the equatorial Pacific, and it looks cold combined with some other cycles. And this screams drought across much of the world. So other than maybe Malaysia, but again, lots of areas of Russia, India, U.S., South America can certainly be dry in this cycle. For folks that have been hoping for a polar vortex, you're finally getting your day here. This ragged thing, as the polar vortex gets weaker and wobbly, you certainly can get an intrusion. It looks like we're finally going to get one here after the snowstorm exit the East Coast. It looks like later this weekend into next week for sure. A glancing shot through the Central Plains, Midwest, and then eventually the Northeast. Anything about polar vortexes is they bring it quickly as they bring in the pretty epically cold Arctic air. They can take it out with them pretty quickly. So you can go from frigid to well above average very quickly, and that's likely to be the case as we get into the third week of February. We may actually see a pretty significant warm-up after it exits. Looking at this week again, 1 through 7 Feb here in the U.S., about 5.9 degrees colder than last year, coldest in 3, 13th coldest in 35, so below average on that front. Maps inset left are trends versus last year, so much, much colder than this time a year ago. 23% drier, 12th wettest in 35 years on a national scale. Obviously more snow here with the big nor'easter, 78% more, most in 10 years, second most in 35 years. So much above average this week, obviously on the snowfall front. Looking at next week, as we get in the second week of February here, 3.7 degrees cooler than last year, coldest in 5 years, 14th coldest in 35 years. So you definitely see signs of that vortex in the Central Plains, upper Midwest, and getting into the Northeast Great Lakes. Again, though, as quick as these come in, they can exit pretty quickly, and they take all the cold air with them. So we may see a sizable warm-up as we get into the latter half of February here. Drier pattern, starting to see dry out a bit. Driest in 5, 7th driest in 35 years, much below average. Snowfall still up a bit, most in 7, 5th most in 35 years. Again, a lot of that will be shifting to the northern Rocky Mountains and the interior Northeast Great Lakes and lake effects type snow. We'll end here with some wintry scenes outside our remote offices here, and hope you're enjoying your snow. And again, don't forget, some folks are going to get into that dreaded dry slot. It's always almost impossible to predict exactly where it sets up, but when you get in it, it tends to cut your totals in half. You get in the upper band of it, the deformation zone area, you can get a dumping. So with that, folks, we hope you have a great week, and we will be back here this time next week.